All right, let's talk pro day risers. Couple guys from Iowa. You got Lucas Van Ness and Jack Campbell. What do you think about these guys, Josh?
Yeah, really impressive when you look at what they were able to accomplish at the combine. Jack Campbell, he came in 6'5", 272, tremendous size. But what he did during the athletic portion of 6'5", 249, was fantastic. What he did on the field, 4.65 seconds in the 40-yard dash, 37.5 vertical jump. You've got a 10'8" broad jump. I mean, those are tremendous numbers from a player of that size. Especially at the linebacker position. So I think what he was able to accomplish is really going to boost his stock up over the next month and a half. I think he's suddenly one of those players that you're considering there in the second round.
Yeah, I mean, I actually kind of blacked out while he's talking, so I agree with Josh.
You're not into the Iowa guys. Well, what are some other risers that both of you think came out of pro day?
I mean, I thought that like the quarterbacks in general, and I know that's, this is me being like, it's easy generic talk, especially when I'm like, when you're doing the first mock draft, you're like very much into like, all right, where are these quarterbacks actually going to slot? It does feel like maybe Will Levis could drop a little bit, but I would just be really surprised if we don't get 4 of these guys off in the top 10 or 15. I just think the way that you see the way that these teams with these picks are acting, and you see the quality of quarterback play from, these 3 guys. And so like CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, I mean, I think Peter King wrote about it. They said Bryce Young, scouts basically watched it. Was like, dude, the scout told him like his height doesn't even show up on tape. Like you don't even think about it on tape because he doesn't have balls batted down and he knows how to work around it. And so you have that, like Bryce Young and CJ Stroud feel like stone cold locks to go in the top 5, given the teams that we have involved up there. And then it's like Will Levis, I think, even though the short and intermediate passes were a concern with how and you were there, right, Josh? I mean, like, it was definitely his, like, it's almost like he's like trying to Josh Allen it up too much. Like he needs to show a little more touch, a little less, like, just, like, you can't gas these intermediate throws and these short throws, like, put it in the right spot. CJ Stroud's really good at that. And then with Richardson, it's such a wild card, but like someone is gonna take a shot on this guy as a possible just monster with upside monster. So I think just the idea of like, it's really hard for me to even conceptualize one of these quarterbacks dropping much out of like the first half of the draft. Like I think we'll see just the way it's set up with the teams and the needs and the where the teams are who need quarterbacks and the supply and demand. You have the Cardinals at 3, who probably are going to trade out of that spot if somebody wants a quarterback if they don't love Will Anderson. Like that, it feels like these quarterbacks are almost like stone cold locked at the top of this draft.
Yeah, I agree. I think Levis, what he showed at his pro day, probably cements himself as a first-round pick. Seeing both Stroud and Levis in person, you kind of get a feel for both of them as passers. Stroud is a little bit more surgical. He's got more rhythm. Levis has that tremendous arm strength. You see the mobility. He's capable of making these throws, these NFL throws that other quarterbacks simply cannot make. So if he's able to do that consistently, you're talking about a player that could be the best quarterback from this draft class, when you look back in hindsight. But now that I've kind of got my notes in order here, we'll go through some of these other risers in the process. You mentioned Van Ness. He was the one that was 6'5", 272. He had a 4.58 second 40-yard dash, jumped very well, tested very well. You look at his game film, he's a player that is built through power. When you see the athletic numbers that he was putting on tape, that is a player that you feel like has upside to be, a more productive rusher, be a little bit more well-rounded. Andrei Iosivas, a wide receiver from Princeton. He's been very productive throughout his career, obviously an intelligent guy coming out of Princeton. 4.43 in the 40-yard dash. He's 6'3", 205, 39-inch vertical jumps. Essentially, all you need to know is that he tested explosively. He's very fast, and I thought he looked good during the on-field portion of the event as well. So this isn't just, a player that is going to test off the charts but not deliver on the field. I think he showed that he has a little bit more potential in that regard. Zach Kuntz, a tight end from Old Dominion, formerly of Penn State. He played 5 games this past season before suffering a season-ending injury. So he was off the team's radar a little bit. Now they're kind of getting more information on him. And he was 6'7", 255 pounds, ran a 4.55 in the 40-yard dash, 40-inch vertical jump, 10'8" broad jump. Again, just fantastic numbers at that position, and somebody that's going to open eyes in this very deep tight end class.
Did you mention Bresee too? Did you have Bresee on there? I was gonna say because Bryan Bresee for Clemson, the pass rusher, like he did his sister pass? He had a really emotional. He had like injuries and all feel, like his sister died in the middle of the season, like a very emotional situation. But this is a guy that these Clemson defenders, man, you look at them and they don't all work out. But you got the Christian Wilkins type. There are a lot of guys coming from that Venables style, and I know he's in Oklahoma now, but this is a guy who I think really, really helped himself in terms of his pro day and how he looked at that Clemson and how he performed at Clemson's pro day.
No question. Former #1 overall recruit coming out of high school, 6'5", 302 pounds. At the combine, he ran 4.86 in the 40-yard dash, 1.71 seconds in a 10-yard split. So you really see the potential that he has, not only as an interior defender stopping the run, but rushing the passer as well. He's somebody that has those attributes that you feel could be a little bit more than just your run stuffing interior defender. I didn't think that he played up to the hype this season. I thought, he was a little bit inconsistent. I would have liked to see him dominate a little bit more with his pedigree, but this is somebody that, as Brinson noted, was dealing with a tremendous amount of adversity. He was dealing with health issues as well. So you kind of have to give him a little bit of grace in this period. And I think we kind of saw him come back to form, not only at the combine, but his pro day, as we're watching right now. You see the athletic potential of this guy. In the interior defensive line, it's very difficult to find quality players like Bresee. So when you have an opportunity to draft him, he's going to go up a little bit higher than what you would expect because that is such a difficult position to fill.
There's a lot of Will Levis hate going on in the chat. We got Billy saying that Will Levis is the next Sam Darnold. And you got Al Bundy saying that Levis is meh, super inaccurate, poor decisions. He's going to be so bad. Billy, why are you saying that Will Levis is the next Sam Darnold?
I'm trolling a little bit just to get the conversation started, but I just don't.
Wait, how is that a comp?
No. For me, as I said before, I was trolling a little bit, but
you're saying he's going to suck, or you just
he's just not going to be a good quarterback to me. I don't think he's going to pan out. I think he's athletically very, shocking, and there's a lot of wow factor with that, but I just don't think he moves the needle enough for me. I don't think he makes those underneath throws. I don't think he's as accurate on those underneath throws as I would like him to be. And that ball's a little wobbly in the air when he is throwing that deep ball. It doesn't give me Josh Allen vibes, even though he's trying to give me those Josh Allen vibes. So it feels like he's trying to hoodwink us a little bit.
I will say this, Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming is not the Josh Allen that we know today either. So
True.
I'm not saying that Levis is going to be that player. I think that's a very dangerous comparison, and it's one that a lot of people have tried to make. I like to compare him to Wyoming Josh Allen, not the Buffalo Bills version of Josh Allen. He is a player with all of the athletic traits to be successful. He just has to put it together. When you look at Allen coming out of college, you look at Levis over the past year at Kentucky, both of them battled injuries in their final year. So they've both overcome adversity. They've both been on teams that, maybe did not live up to expectations. Maybe they didn't have the best supporting cast. And when you're walking into a situation in the NFL where you're going to a team that has a top pick, you would think that they're probably not going to be a team that is best positioned to succeed immediately. So when you have that kind of a track record, rising in that kind of a setting, I think that's valuable to teams. I think they've seen that, he can be a player that keeps his mind on the football field, even when things are not going well.
Yeah. And the other thing too, when you talk about Josh Allen is you had the situation in Buffalo where the Bills, when Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane took over, and it's all right, the Bills got to find a quarterback. They got to get a quarterback. Well, it's no. And the Sam Darnold issue, when you think about the Jets, was we'll just draft Sam Darnold and it'll just work out because he's a quarterback. It's no. If you're going to draft a quarterback that high, if you're going to take a quarterback with the top 10 pick or top 15 pick, like Josh Allen, like Sam Darnold, like anybody, Baker, whoever you want, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis, like you have to make sure that the infrastructure around the quarterback is set up in a way that is going to allow him to succeed, right? So you need you need to have invested in the offensive line before you get the quarterback. You need to have invested something in the weapons before you get the quarterback, and you need to invest in the coaching and have somebody who you can trust who can develop the quarterback. That's why, and again, like I was on Dave Damashek's podcast, the Minus 3 Pod. You should check it out. It's a good episode last week. But like the Chiefs drafted Patrick Mahomes, and they had the weapons: Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill. They had the coaching, Andy Reid. They had an offensive line in place. They had a quarterback who they knew they could start for a year before they forced Mahomes out on the field because he probably wasn't ready in week 1 to go out on the field. Whereas you look at the Bears, and they drafted Mitchell Trubisky in the same draft. They didn't have the coaching because they had John Fox in a lame duck year. They didn't have any offensive line. There were no weapons there, even though they got Allen Robinson, and they forced Trubisky out too early because even though they signed Mike Glennon in free agency, it's like, I'm not saying that Trubisky, but if you flip those quarterbacks, this is what Shaq and I talked about. Put Mahomes in Chicago. He's not Patrick Mahomes. You put Trubisky in Kansas City instead of Chicago, and he's probably a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback who's still in Kansas City. Like that's just coaching and infrastructure and all that stuff matters a ton.
Yeah, Josh Allen was the 3rd quarterback taken in his draft class as well. Coaching matters. I mean, we did not know how much credit to attribute to Brian Daboll in his work with Josh Allen, but now that you've seen him go to New York and have, to a lesser degree, success with Daniel Jones, I think you see the value in having a quality coach that knows how to relate to a young quarterback. If Levis were to end up in that situation, I'm not saying that he would be Josh Allen, but he would have an opportunity to reach that point. To Allen's credit, he was the one that was putting in the work in the offseason. He was the one, dedicating all this extra time to his craft. Now it's on Levis to kind of make that same transition. He's got some room for improvements, and he's going to have an opportunity to walk in the door and help a team wherever he lands.
Based on the criteria that you both listed out, where do you think is the best spot for Will Levis then?
I like Seattle just because he would have the opportunity to sit behind Geno Smith and learn a little while. Their offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, came from the Rams, which is the same offense that Liam Cohen, the former and again now current offensive coordinator at Kentucky, ran with Levis the year that he had his most success. So I think that's a possible fit for him. I do like Frank Reich and his ability to relate to young quarterbacks and what that could mean for a player like Levis or Anthony Richardson, a player that, they're kind of in similar regards. They've got all the athletic talent. They're a little rough around the edges. They just need some coaching and a little bit of time to possibly reach their potential. So I look at Seattle, I look at Carolina being a couple of situations that could possibly help these young quarterbacks.
I think Carolina is a great call. And I've heard, there's some buzz about Carolina liking Levis. Like maybe they're sort of in on Levis. And you can see David Tepper being, as much as like CJ Stroud and Bryce Young feel a little bit safer. I mean, David Tepper is a guy who, he built his fortune, being a hedge fund manager, but he also he would go after distressed assets and then turn them around. And so it's like, I'm not saying Levis is distressed. It's just like that type of mentality. What you're looking for is major upside, right? Maybe you're not thinking all right, he wants to win now, but I also think he's like, what if we get our Josh Allen? And now trading up to number 1 and then drafting Will Levis would certainly be a polarizing decision, but I don't think it's off the table at all.
All right.
Yeah, I think one other thing that I will say, you see this interesting dynamic in Carolina because when you have a head coach and a general manager, that is a short-term role if you do not succeed. So I could see them being drawn to a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud in that regard. But if the owner, David Tepper, comes over the top and he says, hey, Levis is my guy, that's the guy I want, they have to listen to their boss, so it could be Levis, even though the coach and the general manager prefer somebody else. That's the interesting dynamic that you sometimes see happen in an NFL war room.